A bank robbery is like asking out that hot Asian chick you barely know. It sounds like a good plan if you have enough courage. Then you attempt it and she calls you a racist that's out of her league. Well, that kind of stupid courage put me in a van with 2 morons and the whole Minneapolis State Police force after us. With a mixture of suppressing fire, a heavy blizzard, expert driving, and a massive amount of luck, we put some distance between us and the cops. Distance I knew was lessening by the moment. I formed a plan B quickly. We'd find a farmhouse, hide the van in an adjacent barn, and hold the family at gunpoint until the cops pass. I'm reciting that plan now, calmly, but at the time, there were a lot more decibels and cursing involved. We broke sight lines with the cops not long before getting out of the city, so we found an unassuming farmhouse and did as planned. I parked the van and my partners wasted no time rushing the house as to make sure no one called 911. When I made it inside, there was no one to be found. I figured my partners scared the family into hiding, but after making a pass through the house, I found no one. I thought we'd lucked out until the cops pulled up out front. As luck would have it, I spotted a well in the backyard. I told my partners to follow me and close the door behind them. They opted to run across the snowy fields. I waited in that well for a whole day. It was a dry well with a single package in the well's bucket, a manila envelope with Cutie written on it in black Sharpie, and something hard but light in it, rectangular. At some point in my wait, curiosity got the better of me and I opened the package to find a VHS tape. Normally, something like this would be mundane and uninteresting. There could be a billion perfectly normal and rational reasons as to why a tape like this would be down here. But with nothing to do for hours and hours, and a crippling hunger and thirst hitting me, my mind wondered about the tape. What could be on it? Why was the package so clean? That might sound like an odd question, but it made sense at the time. I was stuck in a gross old well. Also, who was Cutie, and was it for them or by them? Something about the placement of the package made me think it was condescending. If it was for Cutie, then they were too dumb to find it, or the person made the tape too hard for them to find. I could just barely hear the cops hanging around and investigating the farmhouse. They peeked down the well a few times, but my all-black clothes and black ski mask made me invisible. Of course, I could kiss the money goodbye. I did have intentions of splitting the money, but I'm sure my partners were caught by now. I was also sure they'd ratted me out. I wasn't part of their crime organization. No loyalty was due to me. So I took my time to plan out my life and distracted myself by thinking about the tape. I can't be sure when it happened, but I know for a fact the van was towed away from the farmhouse. I guess they were stuck at the house for a while due to one form of red tape or another. Most of the police chatter was expected. Stuff like, we know for a fact there were 3, and they wouldn't have dropped someone off without the money. But what stuck with me, what really stuck out, was how did they have time for that? It must have taken more than 4 minutes. Now I know it took around 4 minutes from our arrival at the house for the cops to arrive. But what could they be talking about? All we did was park the van and run inside. What did those unnamed morons do? Could it have something to do with them running? Did they try and set me up? Did they plant this tape here? I had a ton of reasonable and unreasonable questions. Once I climbed out of the well, I hustled back to my safe house. It was a long, boring walk, which turned into a long, boring bus ride. I ate like 5 or 6 bars of raw ramen, too hungry to cook them, and once I was stuffed, I slept. When I woke up, I popped the tape into my combination TV VHS player. Of course I'd have the tape. It was too tempting, and I am a thief. The tape was a home movie of sorts. It was clearly shot recently, but the camera was pointing at a woman dressed like a typical housewife from the 1950s or 40s, around that era. She was in the kitchen from the farmhouse wearing a red polka-dotted dress. dolled up with makeup, and wearing bright yellow cleaning gloves. She was tall and athletic in her frame, with Minnesota pale skin. She wasn't saying anything, just making funny faces and gestures evocative of a naive housewife. She was very attractive, but off-putting. Very stuck up, if you get my meaning. She started laughing and pointing at the camera, then opened up the oven. Judging by the red light emanating from it, it was on. She carefully and rhythmically pulled each finger out of her gloves, while bobbing and swerving her head with each finger she liberated. With both gloves in one hand, she threw them on the ground in an exaggerated motion, but with no force, like a mime would throw something. She started undoing her belt, making a surprised expression, like what she was doing was naughty. The belt fell off and she made a sarcastic jump of surprise when it hit the floor, followed by an exacerbated pantomime of relief. She raised her eyebrows, building anticipation. Anyone could guess what happened next. She unzipped the back of her dress, then faced the camera, tucking her chin down and placing both hands over one another on her chest. She gingerly branched out her hands to pull down her shoulder straps. Then she turned around and continued the action in full. She peeked back at the camera and shaked her behind as the dress fell. She turned around in bra, panties, and stockings. She taunted the camera by pulling out her panties and snapping her bra straps down on her shoulders a few times. Then, without breaking eye contact with me, the viewer, she crawled into the oven and shut the door. Roughly 10 minutes after this, the ovens started spitting out black smoke. The tape ended an hour in. The smoke didn't let up through the duration of the running time. I was horrified at what I had witnessed. I somehow felt guilty. I felt like maybe someone was trying to send me a message. This was not the thing to witness while on the lam. That's what the cops must have been chattering about. But those two goons obviously didn't do it. I slept on it one night, then another. I didn't want to leave the house. That's when the boss of my partners showed up, those two morons. He had an enforcer with him who promptly put a knife to my neck for getting away while they got caught. I started to explain that they didn't listen, and I was the only one who made it out. Then this mob boss tried to pin the murder of this woman on me. The cops assumed those two had something to do with the cooked broad. I explained the situation and showed them the tape. This mob boss was pretty grossed out and torn up over the whole thing, just like me. If you've ever tussled with organized crime, you know there ain't much that give them pause. But this gave this mob boss pause. Once he got his wits back about him, he demanded I turn in the tape to the police, which I did after wiping my prints from it. It took a while, but the murder charges were ultimately dropped. Of course, the robbery charges stood. As it turned out, the holdup on the charges being dropped wasn't due to standard red tape alone, but because the woman in the oven was shorter than the woman in the video by at least 2 feet.